it is Jack Gill and welcome to Redmen Academy. I am joined by James McHale again for this one. We tried to video this last week, but we had a few technical issues, so we're back doing it again. And yeah, we're going to have a look. We're going to start a bit of a new series looking at youth talent this week. We're looking at the Bundesliga. It's been a few weeks now since the Bundesliga has been back, James. Who in particular has caught your eye?
Well, there's been so many different players to watch, and usually, I pick sort of one player over the weekend, but there's been so many players like Nkunku, Davis, who we're all going to talk about later, Thuram as well, who I'm a big fan of. There's so many players that you can watch because there's almost a game sort of every other day, isn't there? So there's no shortage of people at all.
Absolutely. It's been a good filler, hasn't it, for whilst we wait for the Premier League to return. It's been good to know that the Bundesliga's on and every weekend it's given me something to do anyway. So I want to go through this, and we're not going to cover everyone today. We'll probably do more players. I know we want to talk about Tapsoba in a couple of weeks when we do the next one. We've got the Liga coming back, Serie A coming back as well, so we're going to have loads of these to do. I just want to look at Leipzig to start with, and I can't really do this video without bringing in the whole Werner situation. James, we spoke about this for a while on all the Redmen accounts, really, and the Redmen Academy. We haven't hidden the fact that we wanted Timo Werner, and he would be a good player when added to the Liverpool squad. But it's fallen through, and can you understand why?
I get it. I completely understand it. We're not going to pay someone a base salary of 200 grand a week plus bonuses. But it's so frustrating because, while I do understand, I'm gutted because we have hyped him up so much and we know how good he is and how well he would have fitted into our team. So it's one of those, isn't it, really? You win some, you lose some.
Yeah, I've said since this has all happened, really, and since it's fallen through, I understand it, and I understand people getting frustrated, but I think on social media it's gone too far a lot of the time, blaming FSG, and that I think Redmen have done really well to get Dave Maddock in that interview, because when I watched that, it tells you all that you need to know really about what Liverpool are trying to do this summer, and things like the Genie Wijnaldum contract are very, very important to the club, and they're going to be very important this summer in a transfer market where a lot of clubs are going to struggle, and actually Liverpool are in one of the best positions. You're going to get clubs like Chelsea who are willing to take advantage of this and spend, but Chelsea are going to be an anomaly, and actually they need to spend because they're falling further behind. And you're also going to see Arsenal and Tottenham really struggling, and Tottenham made a gamble. They got rid of Pochettino, who, as a project manager, was doing really well with Tottenham. They've employed Mourinho to get trophies, and actually now they're in a situation where they probably couldn't even afford to sack Mourinho further down the line. It's Arsenal as well. They took a gamble, appointed a young manager who's going to need a bit of a project, and now can they afford to give him the money that he needs to bring in the players that he wants to build around him. It's going to be a very interesting few months, James, and I think it's important, being a Liverpool supporter, to know that we're going to do this the Liverpool way, and we might get a good offer for Shaqiri and Wilson, which means we're able to go out and spend. But if not, then we're going to have to put up with what we have, which is already a very good squad, James.
Yeah, I think the worry is, and I do understand people being, a little bit worried that we might find ourselves in that situation where, Tottenham were in last year, where they hadn't refreshed their squad in a couple of years and they sort of flatlined and dropped off because that complacency does seem to creep in. And I know we've got a lot of top level players who we'd like to think that wouldn't happen to, but inevitably standards do drop, and things might have dropped over the last year or so with our attack. So I can see the worry and then, the want to bring in fresh faces. But while as it stands now, we have very good players in the club and we have a lot of exciting youngsters coming through. So, in 12 months' time, we can say, okay, maybe we should have signed players. But right now, I don't think it's the biggest problem in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to hear more on Werner, head over to the redmentv.com, watch the Reds newsroom today. We spoke about it a bit then, and look at all the Redmen accounts over the last few weeks. They've got a lot on there. Redmen News has got a lot. And obviously, if you haven't yet watched that thing with Dave Maddock, that interview with Dave Maddock, go over and watch that right now because it gives you a really good insight on what Liverpool are going to do this summer. And a brilliant interview, James. But let's get cracking with this Bundesliga stuff. We're going to start with Alphonso Davies, who I think is, well, certainly from my perspective, is a player who has really, really caught the eye. You mentioned him in a video a few weeks ago, a few months ago, sorry, on young players to watch. And at that point in time, I think he was a player that everyone knew about. But since then, he's really accelerated, hasn't he? He's on fine form, James.
Yeah, he's creeping into that sort of the generational category that everyone loves to throw around, but he has the potential to be that generational left back. Even if he does end up playing at left back, because there's no reason to say that he won't go back to his natural position. We've seen how deadly and how creative he can be from defence. You push him forward, you give him that free license that Bayern like to give their wide players. Who knows what's going to happen? You can see that he's going to be a quality player. There's no doubt about that. It's just, how far is he going to go? Because he has the potential to go all the way.
The thing is with Alphonso Davies, he's thriving in their system, isn't he? And he's a player that you can see the raw talent in him now. He's not the finished product, but he's got something that is really, really good, and that's the ability, his pace, and the ability to make them recovery runs and them recovery tackles that are so crucial to his game at the minute, and a thing that when it comes and when he improves his defensive performances and adapts to that left back role more, you'll see a perfect player, because those recovery runs are a brilliant thing to have in his game already.
Exactly, yeah. And I saw someone say this on Twitter where he might have weaknesses, but his strengths cover over his weaknesses. He is a little bit of a, not a liability in defence, but he has, he slips up there occasionally, but he's that good and he's that intelligent, he's that quick. He can get back and recover almost straight away, and it's a non-issue. So, yeah, in a few years, once he's had, maybe a little bit more experience in that position, a little bit, more time with senior players, he's going to be one hell of a lad, honestly.
Yeah, and his performances are keeping David Alaba in a bit of a limbo, isn't it? They've had to shift him over to left centre back, really, and he's now Bayern's second choice left back and down in the pecking order in centre backs, really. So it'll be interesting to see whether he's on his way out from Bayern to David Alaba. But Alphonso Davies is definitely a player to watch. He's done really well in 2 games with Bayern this year in the Champions League against Chelsea and Tottenham. You'll know that. I'm sure you'll watch them more. And since the Bundesliga's returned, he has looked outstanding, and he's really improved this season. He absolutely has, and just 19 years of age as well. He's going to go far, that kid. James, in terms of since the Bundesliga's come back, do you think he has been the young man that everyone's been keeping their eye on?
Yeah, and he's really stolen that sort of crown, hasn't he, from Haaland, who's had, he's had injury trouble, he's had fitness problems. He's taken that crown off him, he's run with it, and now he's the one to beat, isn't he? It's that competition, that you love to see between young players where they're constantly pushing each other because they want to be the one in the headlines. You've got your Havertz, your Sanchos, your Haalands, now your Davis as well. They've all had their little period in the spotlight, and right now, I think it's Davis.
Well, the thing is with the Bundesliga, James, and we briefly mentioned Leipzig before when we looked at Timo Werner, but they're a team that aren't very well liked in the Bundesliga for their strategy and the way they've got themselves to the top. But, they're a team that, although they've sort of done it in a legal way for Germany, we all know the rule in Germany, which means, they're majority fan-owned, and Leipzig have sort of gone the wrong way about getting to where they are now. But they've still got a strategy, haven't they? They've still got a way where they want to have faith in young players, and they've got some brilliant youngsters.
Yeah, I mean, say what you want about them as a club, their recruitment strategy is absolutely top tier, and they know how to identify players who are going to be, low risk at the start, but high reward, say 3 or 4 years down the line. And if not, they can just sort of go back into the system, of RB teams where maybe they could lower their level back down to Austria or try somewhere else. They'll recover their money regardless. So it's a perfect business model, really, but it is a business model, not a footballing model.
Yeah, they've got brilliant youngsters like Danny Olmo and Cuckoo. Upamecano, Werner, of course. They've got young players in abundance, and they've got a brilliant upcoming world class coach, who I think is going to become a world class coach in Julian Nagelsmann as well. And I think a lot of people this season tip them to really go toe to toe with Bayern and Dortmund for the title. It's not been that close. We've seen since the Bundesliga returned. I think everyone was hoping for it to be really close and really tight at the end of the season. But Bayern have accelerated and pulled away, and we don't know if the stoppages sort of helped them there, and they've used their experience to pull away. But they've looked phenomenal since the break, and no one's been able to catch them, have they?
No, not at all. And you look at this Leipzig team. There's not a specific part of the pitch where they have really any weakness. You look at their defence. They've got three young French centre-backs who all have that potential to be world-class. They've got experience, they've got legs in midfield, they've obviously got that pace up front, they've added to it recently as well. I think, if they were to keep this group of players together, which obviously we know is not happening now, in 2 years' time, you'd probably be looking at one of the best teams in the world because they'd all be coming, into maturity.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with them in the Champions League as well. Obviously, they're still in that, not out. So moving on, we've got Kai Havertz, James, who is another player who everyone's had their eye on since the Bundesliga's returned. He's a player that every time you watch, you can't help but think he would be an outstanding replacement for Firmino in the future.
Honestly, there's no one else that I'd want, and if we can't afford Werner, there's absolutely no way we can afford Havertz. But honestly, I just enjoy watching him play. I don't care that the fact that we're probably never going to get him. I'm over it now. I've accepted that. I've made peace with it. I just enjoy watching him play because he's such an intelligent player. He's such a joy to watch. You just got to sort of sit back sometimes and think, wow, what a youngster. He's got everything.
Yeah, 20 years old. He's only just older than us, James. He's about to turn 21 in the next few days. It's tomorrow, I think. Yeah, he's turning 21 tomorrow. So happy birthday, Kai Havertz, for tomorrow. That's when we're recording this anyway. But yeah, he's a fantastic young player. And he's been brilliant since the Bundesliga has resumed. And I think he's a player that, obviously, we all knew did well in that number 10 role, but he's looked a bit more advanced, hasn't he? He has been playing in sort of a centre forward, false nine sort of position since football's resumed, and yeah. I think he's played really well there, and that's what's helped Liverpool fans like you and I look at him and go, yep, he would be an excellent replacement for Firmino, and still very, very young, and a player that I know Jurgen Klopp has spoken a lot of, but he smells of Bayern Munich, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's all over. Absolutely, it's inevitable, really, isn't it? If you're going to go to any team, you feel like it's going to be Bayern. They'll build a team around him, won't they? He's that kind of player. He'll be the poster boy for them. And as much as I'd like to think that we have that pull, Bayern have that sort of attraction, don't they, for German players, where they can get anyone they want, the snap of their fingers.
Yeah, and of course he broke that record the other day as well, didn't he? What was it again?
First player under the age of 21 to hit 35 Bundesliga goals.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, a fantastic young man who I think is at the very start of his career, and there's so much more to come from this lad. It's going to be very good to keep our eye on. It's interesting that he was left out of that Bayern Munich game the other day. I know he was injured, but some journalists like to say that, maybe that was part of an agreement that he was going to Bayern in the summer and that he couldn't play this game, or whether his head wasn't in the right place to play it, or you just don't know. But I know there's been some Chelsea rumours in the last few days, and I wonder if that's just to force Bayern into doing it as early as possible, really.
If Chelsea get in, my heart will be absolutely broken. I'll walk away from football. I'll never watch a match again. I'll be absolutely devastated.
Well, what do you make of the comparisons to Julian Brandt, James? Because I see a lot of that, and there's an issue in football these days that everybody has to be compared. Everyone likes to compare everyone to everyone, really, and it's something that I don't like, but I suppose we have to do some of the time here at Red Men, and you have to do in your life. But it's a weird link, isn't it? Two completely different styles, but two incredible players.
I mean, it feels a little bit lazy to me, and it's sort of, to me, it feels like it's two players that play attacking midfield, but there's much more than that. Whereas, Havertz goes further afield and will play on the wing and play up front. Brandt only recently, in the last 2 seasons, has started dropping into actual midfield, not just, playing as an 8. He's been playing in that midfield 3 or in a midfield 2 and a double pivot. And I think if we talk about players who have that adaptability in their game, not many players have gone from, an out-and-out winger, which is what he used to be, to, a proper sitting midfielder. And it's a really strange thing to watch, but it works so well because he has that ability to, do all the leggy stuff in the midfield, but then receive the ball, drive forward, and then he becomes that player he was 2 or 3 years ago, where he's an attacker and he can absolutely switch play perfectly.
Obviously, Brandt's 24 now, but I think since the Bundesliga's returned as well, he's gone under the radar. He's been putting in consistently brilliant performances as well. He is quite inconsistent at times, Julian Brandt, but I think that's because a lot of the work he does is underrated as well, and it can go. The Dortmund side has been the man for them, and I think particularly well in the first couple of games back, star. So yeah, I do think it's lazy, like you say, though, to compare the different players and 2 players that should be admired, but for their own style and in their own way. And as we say, Brandt has 3 or 4 years on Kai Havertz, and it's impossible to compare the 2. But you can look at Havertz right now and say, at his age, did Brandt impress in the way Havertz is? Absolutely not.
There's not many players in world football that have impressed at such a young age. It's insane. Brandt's more of a creator, I'd say, whereas Havertz is your goal scorer. He's your flashy players, and he's got that finesse. Whereas Brandt's silkier. He makes things happen as opposed to doing it directly.
Yeah. Next up, we're going to move on to Marcus Thuram, who is the son of the great Lilian Thuram, obviously. James, a player that I know you love.
Oh, he's brilliant. He's only just arrived. I've got here for £8 million. I thought it was double that. It was only 8 million from Guingamp, which I think I've absolutely butchered. But 10 goals and 8 assists in 30 Bundesliga games this season. He's incredible. So 6'3", absolutely rapid. Built, he's a big lad as well. He can push off challenges. He can push past people. He's got everything, and he's such a joy to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And this has been his real breakthrough season, and his first in the Bundesliga, and he's a phenomenal player. And Mönchengladbach are a really, really good side to watch. Actually, the way they play, their style is very good, and he, along with Plie in their front line, make them a fantastic team and a dangerous side. And they're a team that started really well in the Bundesliga this year, and people worried that when Bayern were out of form, obviously that Mönchengladbach might go and win the league, and they fell off. They have fallen off, as we've seen, but they've still got very dangerous players, and Marcus Thuram is one of them. And at such a young age as well, he's going to be very, very much sought after, isn't he, James?
Yeah, it feels inevitable that he will make that big move soon because 22 years old and he's in this kind of form. It feels like only a matter of time until he makes a move to even like Manchester United. I think he'd fit in very well there. He's got that aura about him, that swagger that you can see him fitting in absolutely perfectly, as much as it pains me to say.
I was going to say that there's quite a lot of links at the minute with Wolves' Raúl Jimenez and Manchester United, and you never know which links with Manchester United to believe in, because every player in the world seems to be linked to Man United. But I think Marcus Thuram would be a brilliant signing for them.
Yeah, perfect signing for them, because he can play up front, he can play on the wing, which is what they've wanted from Anthony Martial, but it's never really worked, has it? Whereas he can do that perfectly.
He's definitely a player that United should keep their eye on, but they've been linked with so many players. They've been like Chelsea the last few days and weeks. They're linked with every name under the sun. So it will be interesting. To go on to Dortmund and Haaland and Sancho, I think we have to talk about these two. Haaland, obviously, in Dortmund's first game, was a player that everyone went, okay, he is a very good player. I know the defence in the Bundesliga is questioned, and a lot of Haaland's style is often questioned with his running and stuff like that. But this has been Haaland's real breakthrough season. He's looked outstanding both for Salzburg and Dortmund this season. There'll be questions of his performance against Bayern, where he obviously picked up a knock and hasn't played since. But he looks a good player, doesn't he, James?
Yeah, whenever you see, a player perform well at a lower level and they get linked to those big moves, you think, are they going to be able to translate it? Is it going to work out for them? And, most of the time it takes a little while if it does work out. But with him, he just, we saw instantly, in that substitute appearance, his style of play is transferable to no matter where he's playing because he backs himself. He knows what he's good at and he knows where to go. He knows exactly where they're going to play the ball because when you've got a player like him, you put it in the box and he's going to be there waiting for it.
Yeah, a player that a lot of people are tipping to be world class in the future. I've seen Rivaldo has compared him to the original Ronaldo, the R9. So, some people can see a lot of ability in this young man, and we've been lucky to see it in the Champions League against us this season. Obviously, he didn't start that first game against us at Anfield, but he came off the bench and worried us, in that second game. Van Dijk, there's not many players that take Van Dijk out of first gear, but he definitely had to get out of first gear to deal with Haaland, and he does look like a world class player. And I think the Dortmund move for him was perfect. He was being looked at by big clubs like Manchester United, and I think Barcelona and Real Madrid had their eye on him as well at the time. But I think he made the right move, a place where he wasn't going to have too much pressure heaped on his shoulders, but it's still a very, very good club who deal with young players perfectly, James.
I mean, there was no reason for him to rush into that big move. He's got all the time in the world on his side. He's probably got 15 years left in his career, at a top level. So what's the point in going too soon, maybe overwhelming yourself with media expectations, and then ultimately ruining, your big chance? Go to a big, successful, well-supported team in Germany, make a name for yourself there, establish yourself, and then move on and become the best player in the world.
Yeah, a player who we're going to talk about now, James, is a player that seems to be following that mold himself, Jadon Sancho. He's a young player who obviously moved from Manchester City, went to Dortmund in a time when no English player, it was unheard of that English players would go abroad and make a name for themselves there. Sancho has changed that slightly. He's the player that English players look towards when they move abroad and try and imitate what Sancho has done. When the Bundesliga returned, there was a lot of eyes on him, particularly from Manchester United fans. There's a lot of rumours that he will join them. I know there was a lot about Chelsea as well, but I think with them signing Werner, that's gone a bit more under the radar. He's a player that we were told had a knock and didn't start the first few games, but then he starts against Paderborn and he bags a hat-trick.
Yeah, I mean, it's calm as you like, isn't it, really? You completely expect it from him. There's no surprise there. We've seen all season 17 goals, 16 assists in the Bundesliga this season. Those are world class level numbers, and if he keeps it up, he's going to be considered, up there with your Mbappe's, with your Messi's, because as long as you're doing it right now, you've got to be considered, haven't you?
The thing is with Jadon Sancho as well, he's always been the man that can provide. He's always been a guy that loves an assist. But this season he started to get the goals as well, and he's improved that side of his game that I think has moved him to the next level, and is the reason why clubs like Manchester United are being linked with moves greater than 100 million for this young lad, because he does look a special talent, and I would be worried if he goes to Manchester United. And I think it was better for Sancho that he scored the hat-trick when he did, because he was so poor in that second half against Bayern Munich when he came off the bench. It was the worst I've ever seen Jadon Sancho play, and then for him to play like he did against Paderborn, who I know aren't the best side in Germany, and actually they're pretty poor. But for him to get his first start since obviously the return of the Bundesliga, and then that to happen, put a few more million on his price tag, James.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if there was any time for him to do it, it was then. Low pressure, best way to bounce back, and putting himself right on the market this summer if he does make that move.
Yeah, and as we finish here, we'll draw you to a part of this new series, which will be we'll try and pick a player or two for you lot to keep your eye on that you may not have heard too much on already. Um, we picked one today, but before that, we just want to talk about Gio Reyna, who we spoke about Sancho there. James Gio Reyna nearly got his first start in the Bundesliga in that first game, but picked up a knock in training, which must have been awful for the lad, a big setback. But when we're talking about Jadon Sancho moving on, the reason Dortmund are in a position to allow him to move on is because Gio Reyna is coming through and he's going to be just as good, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's the best thing to come out of Sunderland since Jordan Henderson, isn't he, really? And, he's so good. And I know we pointed him out in January. We put out a little video and it was he was just breaking onto the scene then. I think he was 16 at the time. And you can see now when he's made those handful of substitute appearances that he's a real player and he's going to be, the next big North American star who's going to be getting all the attention, all the plaudits. And it's only a matter of time until he makes his senior debut in the USA as well.
Yeah, definitely. He's a player that I keep in my eye on, and I was hoping to see more of him since the Bundesliga's return. But obviously, that cruel injury has meant we've not been able to. But in the Champions League against PSG, I believe he came on then and played really well too. And he's a player that I have a lot of faith in to become a great player, and I think that's why Dortmund are prepared to sell Sancho. And it might not be that they're prepared to sell him this summer. But next summer, when Gio Reyna's got more games in his legs at a first team level, I think they definitely will be willing to then because they can still get maximum money out of Jadon Sancho then.
His value's not going down.
Exactly, and they know they've got this lad coming through who they can easily put in instead of Sancho when he moves on. But the player we have picked this week is another Dortmund player, and obviously we'll talk about Hakimi first, James, their right back this season, who he's on loan from Real Madrid, but he's been outstanding for them and a crucial player, who they're going to really miss when he moves on and goes back to Real Madrid. And where do you think Hakimi's future lies?
I mean, I'd like to hope that he does stay at Dortmund. He's become the player he is today at Dortmund. So it makes, if they can afford him, which from what I've heard, Real Madrid don't seem absolutely certain on keeping him for whatever reason. I do not understand why at all, but why it wouldn't be even up for debate. But wherever he goes, he's going to be an absolute, asset to have in the team, isn't he? Because he's so good.
I think the thing is because he's had such a good season, Real Madrid are in a situation where they're thinking, well, we can have him back now, and he can challenge Carvajal for that right back spot. He's a very young lad, or we can sell him on maybe with a buyback clause, and then he comes back obviously in a few years when Carvajal really is on his last legs, and they can get the most money out of him that's possible right now after what has been an outstanding season for him, and that's the only thing that I can think is in Real Madrid's heads right now because they should be snapping their hands up and going, yeah, this loan has been perfect. He's now a superb player, and we can slot him straight in.
Yeah, I mean that's how the loan market should work, and that's how you're loaning out youngsters should be. It's a 2-year loan, let a player establish themselves at a good level, and then reassess from there. And people talk about them in that bracket of world class right backs or players, very much on the edge of being world class. So I'd have him here. So if I was Real Madrid, I'd be an absolute no-brainer. You'd start to phase him in next season, and then maybe 18 months time he'd be your go-to right back. But it's going to be really interesting to see where he does end up this summer because I don't think anyone really has a clue.
Well, one of the reasons that Dortmund may not be willing to pay the money that Real Madrid want is because of our pick this week of the young players that you should be keeping your eye on. And I picked Macho Moret because he's a player that we saw come off the bench against Paderborn in the final stages, and he impressed. He looks very, very good. And 20 years old, if Hakimi goes, I think Dortmund will be looking at this lad and saying it might be throwing you in the deep end a bit, but I reckon he is going to be a fantastic player, James.
Yeah, and he's someone that has been known for a couple of years. Obviously coming through Barcelona's academy and then making that move summer just gone to Borussia Dortmund. And I had a little research about him, and I saw someone say that he was a bit of a late bloomer because he didn't make his first team appearance till he was 20 years old. But 20 years old is absolutely nothing. I think we've got used to seeing your Haalands, your Sanchos, your Mbappes breaking through when they're 18, 17 years old, that we forget how young a 20-year-old was and how many big players in the past didn't break in until they were even older than that. And you look at him play and you can see that there's a player there and that he's got the potential to go all the way. Maybe we'll have to obviously see him a little bit more over the next few weeks, but yeah, big talent, massive talent.
He suits the style as well, and I think he's a player that Dortmund will want to keep there on the next few weeks. We know what Dortmund are like as a club, and then when that league is wrapped up for Bayern, Dortmund will play their youth and they will experiment and play Moret in that right back position. They know that Hakimi may be a player that they don't get back from Real Madrid, and maybe it may be his last few performances in a Dortmund shirt, and therefore they'll want to try a player who maybe they're right back going forwards. And I think Macho Moret is definitely capable of fulfilling that role going forwards for Dortmund. So yeah, keep your eye on him, and we'll be keeping our eye on him and keeping you posted with how he's playing. We like to shine the light on ourselves, so if he's doing really well, we'll take credit for it at Redmen Academy. But yeah, we'll be back in a few days. We've got more Bundesliga action this weekend. And a few other leagues returning as well as the weeks go on. We're getting more and more football back. So you'll get more and more videos with me and James as well. So thank you for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. And if there are any youth players that you want us to have a look at, comment down below and we will have a look at them and let you know what we think. Make sure you drop a like and subscribe to the channel, of course, as well. Let's try and get us to 2K. That's the next target. All right. So thank you, James, for joining me again. And we'll be back soon. Ta-ra.